In the complex landscape of modern poverty, there exists a particular kind of desperation that challenges every assumption about homelessness, responsibility, and the circumstances that can reduce hard-working people to sleeping in their cars with their children. Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom has witnessed countless stories of human struggle, but none quite like the one that would unfold on a cold December morning when a 28-year-old homeless father would stand before his bench carrying not just a citation for sleeping in his vehicle, but a story of determination, sacrifice, and paternal love so profound it would surprise everyone present and remind them that dignity and character can persist even in the most desperate circumstances. Tyler Williams sat in the courthouse waiting area, his 5-year-old daughter Emma, sleeping peacefully in his lap, despite the early hour and unfamiliar surroundings. At 28, Tyler looked older than his years, his face marked by the kind of exhaustion and stress that comes from months of trying to maintain stability. For a child while living without a permanent home, his clothes were clean but worn, carefully maintained despite the challenges of staying presentable when your address is the back seat of a 15-year-old sedan, and his posture reflected the constant vigilance required of someone responsible for protecting a small child in circumstances that offered no guaranteed safety or security. The citation that brought Tyler to court was for illegal camping, issued when a police officer had discovered him and Emma sleeping in their car in a grocery store parking lot at 3 in the morning. The violation carried a fine of $150. But more concerning was the potential for additional charges related to child endangerment that could result in Emma being placed in protective custody and Tyler losing the one thing that gave his life meaning and purpose, his role as his daughter's protector and provider. Tyler, S journey to that courthouse bench had begun 18 months earlier when a series of economic disasters had combined to destroy what had once been a stable, if modest, middle-class life. He had been working as an assistant manager at a regional chain restaurant, earning enough to support himself and Emma in a small but comfortable apartment, when the restaurant had closed unexpectedly as part of a corporate restructuring that eliminated dozens of locations across New England. The unemployment benefits that followed had been insufficient to maintain their rent, and despite Tyler's desperate efforts to find comparable employment, the job market had been unforgiving to someone whose work experience was primarily in the struggling food service industry. The loss of their apartment had been devastating, but not immediately catastrophic, as Tyler had initially found temporary housing with a friend who had offered them a couch in exchange for help with utilities and household expenses. But temporary arrangements have a way of becoming permanent burdens, and after 3 months, Tyler had recognized that his presence with a 5-year-old child was straining his friend's relationship and creating tensions that threatened to explode into conflicts that would leave both Tyler and Emma without even that precarious shelter. Rather than risk burning bridges with one of the few people willing to help them, Tyler had made the difficult decision to move into his car with Emma, viewing it as a temporary measure while he continued to search for employment and permanent housing. His 15-year-old Honda Civic had become their entire world. Bedroom, dining room, storage space, and the mobile platform from which Tyler conducted his job search and managed the complex logistics of caring for a young child without access to basic amenities like a kitchen, bathroom, or reliable electricity. The challenges of living in a car with a 5-year-old were overwhelming in ways that Tyler had never imagined when he made the decision to leave his friend's couch. Basic hygiene became a constant struggle, requiring careful planning and the use of public restrooms, library facilities, and the occasional kindness of business owners who allowed them to clean up in exchange for purchasing something from their establishments. Meals had to be simple and portable, consisting mainly of items that didn't require cooking or refrigeration and could be eaten without creating mess or attracting attention to their living situation. Sleep was perhaps the most challenging aspect of their car-based existence, requiring Tyler to find locations that were safe, legal, and unlikely to attract police attention while also being suitable for a young child who needed consistent rest and some sense of security. He had developed a rotation of parking spots behind a 24-hour laundromat where their presence wouldn't seem unusual, in the far corner of a hospital parking garage where cars remained overnight for legitimate reasons, and occasionally in residential areas where their modest sedan wouldn't stand out among other parked vehicles. Emma's needs had become Tyler's obsession and the organizing principle around which every decision was made. Despite their circumstances, he was determined to maintain as much normalcy as possible in her life, which meant ensuring she attended kindergarten regularly, had clean clothes and adequate nutrition, and received the medical care and attention necessary for a healthy 5-year-old. The complexity of maintaining these standards while living in a car had required Tyler to become expert at finding free resources, managing schedules around public facility hours, and maintaining the fiction that they were not homeless when interacting with school officials and other authorities, who might intervene if they understood the full scope of the family situation. The job search that consumed Tyler's days had been complicated by the logistical challenges of being homeless. He had no permanent address to put on applications, no reliable place to shower and prepare for interviews, and no childcare options that would allow him to work traditional schedules. Phone interviews could be conducted from the car, but in-person meetings required careful planning to ensure Emma was supervised and that Tyler appeared professional despite their living situation. He had managed to obtain several job offers over the months, but each had presented complications: shifts that conflicted with school hours, wages insufficient to afford both child care and housing deposits, or locations too far from their current base of operations to be practical without major changes to their survival routine. The citation that had brought them to court had resulted from one of Tyler's few miscalculations in their carefully planned existence. He had chosen to park behind a grocery store that usually allowed overnight parking, but a new security guard unfamiliar with the store's informal policies had called police to investigate what appeared to be someone living in their vehicle. Officer Rodriguez, responding to the call, had approached the car at 3 in the morning to find Tyler and Emma sleeping in the back seat, surrounded by the neat organization of belongings that told the story of people making the best of an impossible situation. Tyler, S interaction with the police officer had been respectful and honest, immediately acknowledging their situation and explaining that he was doing everything possible to find stable housing while ensuring Emma's safety and well-being. Officer Rodriguez, a father himself, had been moved by Tyler's obvious devotion to his daughter and his determination to maintain her stability despite their circumstances, but departmental policy and legal requirements had forced him to issue the citation for illegal camping, while also initiating a report to Child Protective Services about a minor living in a vehicle. The days following the citation had been filled with anxiety about both the legal consequences Tyler faced and the possibility that social services might determine that Emma would be better served in foster care than living with her devoted but homeless father. Tyler had spent hours researching legal options, contacting social service agencies about resources for homeless families, and preparing for the court appearance that would determine not just whether he would pay a fine, but whether he would retain custody of the child who represented his entire reason for continuing to fight through circumstances that might otherwise have defeated him. As Tyler sat in the courthouse waiting area that December morning, gently stroking Emma's hair as she slept against his chest, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed from the stable routine they had enjoyed just 18 months earlier. But despite the hardships, the uncertainty, and the daily struggle to meet Emma's needs without reliable shelter, Tyler had never questioned his commitment to being her father and protector. The love he felt for his daughter had given him strength he didn't know he possessed and had transformed him into someone willing to endure any hardship to ensure her safety and happiness. The Tyler Williams who sat holding his sleeping daughter in the courthouse that morning was a man transformed by circumstances he could never have imagined when Emma was born 5 years earlier. At that time, Tyler had been 23 years old, recently promoted to assistant manager at Romano's family restaurant, and filled with optimism about his ability to provide a stable, loving home for his daughter despite being a single father. Emma's mother, Jessica, had struggled with addiction issues that made her unable to care for a child, but Tyler had willingly embraced full custody, viewing fatherhood not as a burden, but as the most important responsibility and privilege of his life. Those early years of Emma's life had been challenging but manageable for Tyler, who had thrown himself into learning everything he needed to know about caring for an infant while maintaining his demanding work schedule. He had become expert at preparing bottles at 3 in the morning, managing diaper changes with military precision, and finding reliable childcare that would allow him to work the irregular hours required in restaurant management. His small apartment had been transformed into a child-friendly space filled with toys, books, and the constant evidence of a devoted father doing everything possible to create a nurturing environment for his daughter. Tyler, quote, "S work at Romano's had been more than just employment. It had been a career path that seemed to offer stability and advancement opportunities for someone without a college degree, but with strong work ethic and natural leadership abilities. He had started as a server while still in high school, worked his way up to shift supervisor, and eventually earned promotion to assistant manager based on his reliability, customer service skills, and ability to manage staff during busy periods. The restaurant had become like a second family to Tyler, with longtime employees who had watched Emma grow from infant to toddler and had provided informal support system that helped him balance work and parenting responsibilities. The news that Romano's corporate office was closing their location, along with 12 other restaurants across New England, had come without warning on a Tuesday morning in August. Tyler had arrived for his regular morning shift to find a corporate representative and a security guard posting notices that the restaurant would cease operations immediately, with all employees receiving 2 weeks' severance pay and information about filing for unemployment benefits. The shock of losing not just his job but his career path had been compounded by the realization that Emma, now 4 years old and accustomed to visiting Daddy at work, would no longer have the extended restaurant family that had helped raise her. The unemployment benefits Tyler received were calculated at 60% of his regular salary, which had been adequate but not generous even when he was working full-time. The reduced income made it impossible to maintain their apartment rent, utilities, and childcare expenses while continuing to provide Emma with the stability and resources she needed. Tyler had initially been optimistic about finding comparable employment, but the restaurant industry had been struggling with post-pandemic challenges, and management positions comparable to what he had lost were scarce and highly competitive. The job interviews Tyler managed to secure had been exercises in frustration and disappointment. Entry-level positions paid significantly less than unemployment benefits and offered no path to management-level income, while management positions at other restaurants either required experience with different systems than those Tyler knew or were located too far from his apartment to be practical given his childcare responsibilities. Several potential employers had shown interest until they learned about Emma, at which point conversations about scheduling flexibility and family responsibilities had led to polite rejections and the understanding that single fathers faced additional barriers in an industry known for demanding irregular hours and weekend availability. The decision to move in with his friend Marcus had been difficult for Tyler, who had always prided himself on independence and self-sufficiency. But with his savings exhausted and eviction notices accumulating, accepting Marcus's offer of temporary housing had seemed like the responsible choice for Emma's well-being, even though it meant disrupting the routine and stability that had been so important to her development. The couch in Marcus's one-bedroom apartment had become their home for 3 months, during which Tyler had contributed to household expenses while continuing his job search and trying to maintain some sense of normalcy for Emma. But temporary arrangements have expiration dates, and Tyler had recognized that his presence with a young child was creating stress for Marcus, whose girlfriend had begun expressing frustration about the loss of privacy and space in their relationship. Rather than wait for tensions to reach a breaking point that might damage one of his few remaining friendships, Tyler had made the difficult decision to move into his car with Emma, viewing it as a short-term solution while he continued searching for employment that would allow them to secure permanent housing. The transition to living in the Honda Civic had required Tyler to develop entirely new skills and strategies for meeting Emma's needs. The car had to serve multiple functions: bedroom, where they slept on carefully arranged cushions and blankets; dining room, where meals consisted of items that could be eaten cold or prepared with a small camping stove used outside the vehicle; and mobile office, where Tyler continued his job search using library computers and conducted phone interviews while Emma played quietly in the back seat. Maintaining Emma's school attendance had become Tyler's top priority and greatest logistical challenge. He had managed to keep her enrolled in the same kindergarten she had attended before they became homeless, but this required careful coordination of their morning routine to ensure she arrived clean, appropriately dressed, and on time despite having spent the night in a car. Tyler had developed relationships with sympathetic business owners who allowed them to use restroom facilities for morning hygiene routines, and he had become expert at organizing their limited wardrobe to ensure Emma always had clean clothes that met school dress code requirements. The emotional impact of their situation on Emma had been Tyler's greatest concern throughout their months of homelessness. 5-year-olds are resilient but also perceptive, and despite Tyler's efforts to frame their car-based lifestyle as an adventure, Emma had begun asking questions about when they would have a real house again, and why other kids got to go home to their own bedrooms while she slept in the back seat of Daddy's car. Tyler had answered her questions with as much honesty as seemed appropriate for her age, explaining that they were going through a difficult time, but that he was working hard to find them a better place to live. The job leads that had seemed most promising over their months of homelessness had all presented impossible trade-offs between Tyler's need for income and his responsibility to Emma. A management position at a restaurant 30 miles away would have paid well, but required relocating to an area where they had no connections or support systems. A retail management job offered good benefits, but demanded weekend and evening hours that would interfere with Emma's bedtime routine and leave her without adequate supervision. Part-time positions that would have allowed Tyler to maintain consistent involvement in Emma's daily routine paid wages insufficient to afford both childcare and housing deposits. The night before their court appearance, Tyler had sat in the driver's seat while Emma slept in the back, reviewing the limited options available to them and trying to prepare mentally for the possibility that Judge Caprio might determine that Emma would be better served in foster care than continuing to live in a car with her devoted but struggling father. The thought of losing Emma had been more terrifying than any fine or legal consequence he might face, because she represented not just his daughter but his purpose, his motivation, and his hope for building a better future despite their current circumstances. "Tyler Williams," the court clerk announced, and the young father gently woke Emma, who had been sleeping peacefully against his chest, despite the formal courtroom setting. As Tyler stood and helped his daughter to her feet, adjusting her small pink jacket and smoothing her dark curls, everyone in the courtroom could see the tender care with which he attended to her needs, even in this stressful moment. Emma, still drowsy but instinctively trusting, took her father's hand as they walked toward Judge Caprio's bench, her small presence a poignant reminder that this case involved not just a homeless man, but a devoted father and the innocent child, whose welfare depended entirely on his ability to provide and protect. Judge Caprio looked up as they approached, immediately struck by the sight of the young father and daughter walking hand in hand toward his bench. In his decades of experience, he had occasionally seen children accompanying parents to court, but there was something different about this pair. The obvious love and protection flowing between them, the way Emma looked up at her father with complete trust, despite their uncertain circumstances, and most tellingly, the dignity with which Tyler carried himself, despite the clear signs of someone living without permanent shelter. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," Judge Caprio said gently, his voice automatically softening in the presence of a young child. "And good morning to you too, young lady," he added, directing a warm smile toward Emma, who moved slightly behind her father but returned the judge's greeting with a shy wave. Tyler straightened as he addressed the court, his voice respectful, but tinged with the anxiety of someone whose entire world hung in the balance of this hearing. "Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you for allowing my daughter to be present. I didn't have anyone to watch her, and I wanted to be completely transparent about our circumstances." The honesty and directness of Tyler's opening statement immediately captured Judge Caprio's attention. Most defendants tried to present their best possible image to the court, but Tyler had chosen to appear with Emma, knowing that her presence would make their homelessness obvious while also demonstrating his commitment to her care and his unwillingness to hide the reality of their situation. "Mr. Williams, I see you're here about a citation for illegal camping. Can you tell me what happened?" Judge Caprio asked, his tone indicating both professional interest and genuine concern for understanding the full circumstances. Tyler took a breath, his hand finding Emma's for comfort and strength before he began to explain their situation. "Your Honor, my daughter and I have been living in my car for the past 7 months. We were parked behind Morrison's grocery store, where I believed overnight parking was permitted, when Officer Rodriguez found us sleeping in the vehicle around 3 in the morning. The simple, factual statement sent a ripple of surprise through the courtroom. While homelessness was not uncommon in Providence, seeing a well-spoken young father with his daughter in court for living in their car presented a human face to poverty that challenged preconceptions about who becomes homeless. And why? Judge Caprio leaned forward, his expression shifting from judicial neutrality to deep concern. "Mr. Williams, can you tell me how you and your daughter came to be living in your car?" Tyler's explanation came with the organized precision of someone who had thought deeply about his circumstances and taken full responsibility for the choices that had led to their current situation. "Your Honor, 18 months ago, I was working as an assistant manager at Romano's family restaurant. When the restaurant closed unexpectedly, I lost not just my job, but my career path. Despite my best efforts to find comparable employment, I haven't been able to secure work that pays enough to afford both childcare and housing." Judge Caprio found himself moved by Tyler's straightforward account, which demonstrated both accountability for his situation and a clear understanding of the practical challenges he faced as a single father in difficult economic circumstances. "What kind of work are you looking for, Mr. Williams?" "I have 8 years of restaurant management experience, Your Honor, but I'm willing to work in any field that would allow me to support Emma and eventually secure stable housing for us. The challenge is finding employment that pays sufficient wages while also accommodating my responsibility to ensure Emma attends school regularly and receives proper care." The judge could hear the frustration and exhaustion in Tyler's voice, but also the unwavering commitment to his daughter's well-being that had obviously guided every decision he had made during their months of homelessness. "Mr. Williams, how are you managing Emma's schooling and daily needs while living in your car?" Tyler's face brightened slightly as he described the systems he had developed to maintain stability for Emma despite their circumstances. "Your Honor, Emma attends kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary every day. We have a routine where we get up early, use public facilities to clean up and get ready, and I drive her to school before beginning my job search or attending interviews. She's never missed a day of school, and her teacher tells me she's doing well academically." Emma looked up at her father with obvious pride as he described their daily routine, her small hand still firmly clasped in his as she listened to him explain how hard he worked to take care of her. Judge Caprio found himself deeply moved by the visible bond between father and daughter and Tyler's determination to maintain normalcy in Emma's life despite their extraordinary circumstances. "Emma," Judge Caprio said gently, addressing the 5-year-old directly, "how are you doing, sweetheart? Are you okay living with Daddy in the car?" Emma looked up at the judge with the serious expression that some children adopt when addressing adults in authority, then glanced at her father for reassurance before answering. "It's okay. Daddy makes it like camping, and he tells me stories at night. But I hope we can have a house again soon so I can have my own room like my friends do." The innocent honesty of Emma's response seemed to hit everyone in the courtroom like a physical force. Here was a 5-year-old who had adapted to circumstances no child should have to endure, supported by a father who had managed to frame their homelessness in terms that allowed her to maintain hope and trust despite their difficult reality. Judge Caprio felt his throat tighten with emotion as he processed Emma's words and the broader implications of what he was witnessing. "Tyler," he said, his voice growing more personal as he used the young father's first name. "I can see that you're doing everything possible to care for Emma under extremely difficult circumstances. Tell me honestly, what do you need to get back on your feet?" Tyler's answer revealed both his practical understanding of their needs and his reluctance to ask for help that he felt he should be able to provide himself. "Your Honor, I need stable employment that pays enough to afford a security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment, as well as childcare while I'm working. I've had several job offers, but they've all presented complications. Either the wages are too low, the hours don't work with Emma's school schedule, or the locations are too far from our current support systems." Judge Caprio found himself deeply impressed by Tyler's clear analysis of his situation and his obvious prioritization of Emma's stability and well-being in every decision he made. The young father standing before him wasn't looking for excuses or sympathy. He was looking for the opportunity to provide for his daughter and rebuild the stable life they had lost through no fault of their own. "Tyler, what would happen if I were to impose the full fine for this citation?" Judge Caprio asked, though his tone suggested he was already considering alternatives. Tyler Quote's honesty about their financial reality was both heartbreaking and admirable. "Your Honor, I currently have $17 to my name. Any fine would either go unpaid, which I assume would create additional legal problems, or would have to come from money I've budgeted for Emma's food and basic needs. Either option would make our already difficult situation worse without addressing the underlying issues that led to us living in our car." Judge Caprio sat in stunned silence for several moments after Tyler finished speaking, his admission about having only $17 hanging in the air like a testament to the kind of desperate circumstances that could reduce a devoted father to choosing between legal compliance and feeding his child. In his 3 decades on the bench, the judge had encountered poverty in many forms, but there was something particularly heartbreaking about witnessing a young father's complete honesty about circumstances that would have justified bitterness or desperation, yet had instead revealed character, dignity, and unwavering devotion to his daughter's well-being. When Judge Caprio finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion and filled with the kind of moral conviction that came from recognizing authentic heroism in the most unlikely circumstances. "Tyler," he began, his voice carrying none of the formal distance typical of court proceedings, "I want you and everyone in this courtroom to understand something very important about what we're witnessing here today." The judge stood up from his bench, immediately commanding the attention of everyone present and signifying that something extraordinary was about to unfold. His gesture wasn't just judicial protocol. It was a demonstration of respect for a man whose circumstances had reduced him to homelessness, but whose character had elevated him to something approaching sainthood in his devotion to his child. "Tyler, what I see standing before me is not a man who has failed as a father, but a man who has redefined what success looks like when the world presents impossible choices," Judge Caprio said, his voice rising with passionate conviction. "You lost your job through no fault of your own, faced economic circumstances that would have defeated many people, and yet you have maintained your daughter's school attendance, her health, her emotional security, and most importantly, her absolute trust in your love and protection." Tyler felt tears beginning to form in his eyes as he heard his struggles described not as failures, but as evidence of his commitment to Emma. For months, he had questioned every decision, wondered if he was doing enough, feared that loving his daughter wasn't sufficient to justify the circumstances he was asking her to endure. Judge Caprio's voice grew stronger as he continued his unprecedented response to Tyler's case. Tyler, the fact that you appear in this courtroom with Emma, that you refuse to hide your circumstances or make excuses for your situation, that you prioritize her needs over your own comfort and dignity, these actions represent the highest form of parental love and responsibility. The courtroom had grown completely silent as everyone present absorbed the judge's passionate defense of Tyler's character and choices. Even the court officers, accustomed to routine proceedings, were visibly moved by what they were witnessing. Furthermore, Judge Caprio continued, turning to address the entire courtroom. I want everyone here to understand that Tyler Williams represents thousands of families in our community who are one economic crisis away from similar circumstances. The difference is that Tyler has faced this crisis with grace, honesty, and absolute dedication to his daughter's welfare. Judge Caprio returned his attention to Tyler and Emma, his expression reflecting both deep respect and determination to address their immediate needs. Tyler, I am not only dismissing this citation completely, but I am going to do everything in my power to help you and Emma get back on your feet. The judge reached into his desk and pulled out his personal checkbook, a gesture that caused audible gasps from several people in the courtroom. Tyler, I'm writing you a personal check that will cover a security deposit and first month's rent for an apartment. No father doing what you're doing for his daughter should have to choose between legal fines and feeding his child. Tyler stared at Judge Caprio in disbelief, unable to process the magnitude of what was being offered. Your Honor, I can't accept charity. I've always worked for what I have, and I want to earn my way back to stability. Judge Caprio looked at Tyler with understanding and respect for his pride, but also with the firm conviction of someone who recognized exceptional circumstances that required exceptional responses. Tyler, this isn't charity. This is community investment in a father who has proven himself worthy of support and a child who deserves the stability her father is working so hard to provide. But Judge Caprio's extraordinary response didn't end with financial assistance. He turned to address his court clerk with specific instructions that would address Tyler's broader challenges. I want you to immediately contact the Providence Restaurant Association and arrange a meeting between Tyler and restaurant owners who are currently hiring management-level positions. Someone with 8 years of experience and Tyler's obvious character should have access to every employment opportunity available. The comprehensive nature of Judge Caprio's response reflected his understanding that Tyler's problems required more than temporary financial relief. They needed systemic solutions that would allow him to rebuild the stable life he had lost through circumstances beyond his control. Additionally, Judge Caprio continued, I want you to contact the Providence Housing Authority and explain Tyler's situation. A father who has maintained his daughter's school attendance while living in a car deserves priority consideration for family housing assistance. Emma, who had been listening quietly to the adult conversation, tugged on her father's hand and whispered something that made Tyler smile, despite his tears. Judge Caprio, noticing the interaction, knelt down to Emma's eye level and spoke directly to her with the warmth of a grandfather addressing his own grandchild. Emma, sweetheart, your daddy is one of the best fathers I have ever met. He loves you so much that he's willing to do anything to take care of you, and that love is going to help you have a wonderful life, Judge Caprio said gently. Emma looked at the judge with the serious expression children adopt when they sense that adults are discussing something very important. Are you going to help my daddy find us a house? She asked, with the directness that only children can bring to complex situations. Judge Caprio's voice was filled with warmth and certainty as he responded, Yes, Emma, we're going to help your daddy find you a house. And I want you to know that your daddy is a hero for taking such good care of you. Tyler could no longer contain his emotions and began crying openly, overwhelmed by the recognition, support, and hope that Judge Caprio was offering. "Your Honor, I don't know how to thank you. For months, I've felt like I was failing Emma, like I wasn't enough to give her what she needs." Judge Caprio stood and placed a gentle hand on Tyler's shoulder, speaking with the conviction of someone who had witnessed authentic courage and character. "Tyler, you haven't failed Emma. You've shown her what real love looks like. She will remember for the rest of her life that when things got difficult, her father never gave up on her, never stopped fighting for her, and never let circumstances diminish his commitment to her well-being." The standing ovation that erupted in the courtroom was spontaneous and heartfelt, with everyone present rising to honor a young father whose love for his daughter had transformed desperate circumstances into an example of human dignity and devotion. Tyler stood holding Emma's hand, both of them surrounded by applause from strangers who had been moved by their story and inspired by Judge Caprio's recognition that sometimes the greatest justice comes not from punishment, but from providing support to people who deserve a second chance. The transformation that began in Judge Caprio's courtroom that December morning unfolded with remarkable speed and thoroughness, demonstrating how quickly circumstances can change when community resources are mobilized on behalf of someone whose character and determination have been recognized and validated. Within 48 hours of Tyler and Emma's court appearance, the support network that Judge Caprio had initiated began producing tangible results that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of their lives and restore the stability that Tyler had been fighting to achieve for 7 long months. The first breakthrough came from the Providence Restaurant Association, which had responded to Judge Caprio's call with an enthusiasm that surprised even the judge. Restaurant owners who had watched the video of Tyler's court appearance were moved not just by his circumstances, but by his professionalism, articulate communication, and obvious dedication to his daughter's well-being. Within 24 hours, Tyler had 3 interviews scheduled with restaurant groups looking for experienced management personnel, each offering salaries that would support independent housing and child care, while Emma attended school. The interview that would change Tyler's life took place at Coastal Kitchen Group, a family-owned company operating 6 restaurants throughout Rhode Island. The owner, Maria Castellano, was herself a working mother who had built her business with an understanding of the challenges faced by parents trying to balance career responsibilities with family needs. When Tyler explained his situation and demonstrated his knowledge of restaurant operations, inventory management, and staff supervision, Maria saw not just an experienced candidate, but someone whose personal struggles had given him additional insight into employee challenges and customer service excellence. "Tyler, I'm not just offering you a job," Maria had said during their interview. "I'm offering you a career with a company that understands that our employees' family stability makes them better workers, and better workers make us all more successful. We have excellent benefits, including health insurance that covers Emma, and we work with our management staff to ensure their schedules accommodate their children's needs." The position Maria offered was assistant general manager for their newest location, with a starting salary of $58,000 annually, health benefits, and the flexibility to adjust his schedule around Emma's school requirements. The job represented not just income, but the restoration of Tyler's professional identity and his ability to plan for a future that extended beyond daily survival. The housing assistance that Judge Caprio had arranged through the Providence Housing Authority proved equally transformative. The caseworker assigned to Tyler's situation, Linda Morrison, had been moved by both his story and the judge's personal advocacy and had expedited his application through programs typically involving months-long waiting list. Within a week of his court appearance, Tyler and Emma were approved for a 2-bedroom apartment in a family-friendly complex that included a playground, laundry facilities, and most importantly, other children Emma's age who could become friends and playmates. The The day Tyler and Emma moved into their new apartment marked the end of 7 months of homelessness and the beginning of what would become a remarkable story of recovery and renewal. Emma's reaction to having her own bedroom again, complete with a bed, dresser, and space for the toys that had been stored in boxes at Marcus's apartment, was pure joy that brought tears to Tyler's eyes and confirmed that every sacrifice he had made during their months in the car had been worth this moment. "Daddy, is this really our house?" Emma had asked as they explored their new home, her small hand in his as they walked from room to room. "Can we stay here forever?" Tyler's answer carried the weight of hard-won security and hope restored. "Yes, sweetheart, this is our home, and as long as I have anything to say about it, we'll never have to live in the car again." The stability that came with permanent housing and steady employment allowed Tyler to address other aspects of their lives that had been neglected during their period of homelessness. Emma was able to invite friends from school to play dates, participate in after-school activities that had been impossible when their schedule was dictated by survival needs, and most importantly, develop the kind of consistent routine that allows children to feel secure and focus on learning and growing rather than simply coping with uncertainty. 3 months after his court appearance, Tyler returned to Judge Caprio's chambers for a follow-up visit that the judge had requested to check on their progress. The change in both Tyler and Emma was immediately apparent. Tyler's posture was more confident, his appearance reflected the reduced stress of stable employment and housing, and Emma's bright chatter and obvious comfort in the courthouse demonstrated the security that comes from knowing her father had successfully rebuilt their lives. "Judge Caprio," Tyler said, shaking the older man's hand warmly, "I brought Emma to see you because we both wanted to thank you personally for what you did for our family. Without your intervention, I don't know if we ever would have gotten out of that cycle of homelessness and job searching that was leading nowhere." Emma, now 6 years old and more confident in formal settings, had prepared her own message for the judge. "Judge Caprio, thank you for helping my daddy find us our house. I have my own room now with a purple bedspread and I can have friends come over to play. Daddy says you're a very good person." Judge Caprio accepted Emma's thanks with the warmth of someone whose faith in human potential had been vindicated by Tyler's success. "Emma, your daddy didn't need my help to be a wonderful father. He was already doing that. All I did was help him get the opportunity to show other people what I could see that day in court." During their conversation, Tyler shared news that particularly pleased the judge. He had been promoted to general manager of the Coastal Kitchen Group's newest location, with a salary increase and profit-sharing opportunities that would allow him to begin saving for Emma's future education. More importantly, Tyler had begun volunteering with a local homeless services organization, using his experience to help other families navigate the challenges of finding housing and employment while maintaining children's stability and school attendance. "The best part of what happened to us," Tyler told Judge Caprio, "is that now I can help other parents who are going through what Emma and I experienced. I understand the specific challenges of trying to maintain your dignity and your children's routine when you don't have a place to call home." Tyler's volunteer work had evolved into a part-time position as a family advocate with Providence Family Services, where he worked with homeless families to develop practical strategies for maintaining children's school attendance, accessing resources, and preparing for job interviews while living in vehicles or temporary shelter. His combination of professional experience and personal understanding of homelessness made him uniquely qualified to provide both practical advice and emotional support to parents facing the same impossible choices he had navigated. 1 year after his court appearance, Tyler Williams had become something of a local celebrity, regularly invited to speak at social services conferences and community events about the importance of seeing past people's circumstances to recognize their potential and character. His message was always the same: homelessness can happen to anyone, but with appropriate support and opportunity, people can rebuild their lives and contribute meaningfully to their communities. Judge Caprio began incorporating Tyler's story into His own speaking engagements, using their case to illustrate how the justice system could serve broader social functions when judges looked beyond immediate violations to understand the human circumstances that created them. Tyler Williams reminded me that sometimes the most important justice we can provide isn't punishment for breaking rules, but recognition of the extraordinary efforts people make to do right by their families, even when the world seems stacked against them. The judge would tell audiences of legal professionals and community leaders the citation for illegal camping that had once threatened to separate Tyler from Emma and impose financial penalties he couldn't afford had instead become the catalyst for a transformation that demonstrated the power of compassion, community support, and individual determination to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances. Tyler's story proved that sometimes the people who appear to need help the most are actually the people most capable of helping others, once they're given the opportunity to rebuild their lives and share the wisdom that comes from having survived and overcome extraordinary challenges. Emma, now a confident first grader with her own bedroom, friends, and stability, would later say that she remembered living in the car as the time when Daddy and I were camping together. But she would also remember it as proof that her father's love was strong enough to protect her no matter what happened, and that there were good people in the world who would help families when they needed it most. The security she gained from that experience would stay with her throughout her life, providing a foundation of trust and resilience that would serve her well in whatever challenges lay ahead.